Two companies, two philosophies, two very different bets on what the future of artificial intelligence should look like. In San Francisco, Anthropic has spent the past year refining a model built for reliability. Not the biggest, not the loudest. Just the one enterprises trust to run unattended for hours at a time. In Beijing, Moonshot AI just shipped something audacious. A 2.8 trillion parameter model, the largest open-weight AI system ever built. And in 3 days, on July 27th, its full weights become public for anyone on Earth to download, inspect, and run. This is Kimi K3 versus Claude Opus 4.8. One is closed, polished, and built for trust. The other is massive, open, and built to prove a point. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which one deserves a place in your workflow and why the honest answer is more interesting than either fan base wants to admit. Let's start with the basics, because these two models come from almost opposite starting points. Claude Opus 4.8 launched on May 28, 2026. It's Anthropic's flagship, an upgrade to the Opus line that the company describes as a modest but tangible improvement over its predecessor, Opus 4.7. It's proprietary. You access it through Claude.ai, the Claude API, or Claude Code. There are no downloadable weights, no self-hosting, no looking under the hood. Kimi K3 arrived 7 weeks later, on July 16th. Moonshot AI, the Chinese lab behind it, calls it their most capable model to date. 2.8 trillion parameters, built on a new architecture called Kimi Delta Attention, paired with something called Attention Residuals. It's currently accessible through Kimi's website, Kimi Code, and its API. But the headline feature is what happens next. The full model weights are scheduled for public release by July 27th, making it, once that happens, the largest open-weight language model in existence. So right away, we have a defining split. Opus 4.8 is a sealed, professionally maintained product. Kimi K3 is about to become a public resource that anyone, anywhere, can put on their own hardware. Let's talk numbers, because the scale difference here is genuinely staggering. Kimi K3 runs on a mixture of experts' design. 2.8 trillion total parameters, but for any given task, it only activates 16 out of 896 specialized experts. Moonshot calls this the Stable Latent MOE framework, and they claim it delivers roughly 2.5 times the scaling efficiency of their previous flagship, K2. In plain terms, they're converting raw computing power into usable intelligence more effectively than before. The Kimi Delta Attention mechanism is the other headline piece. It's a hybrid linear attention system, designed to let information flow more smoothly through very long sequences in very deep networks. Combined with attention residuals, the goal is a model that doesn't lose the thread on long, complex tasks. Anthropic doesn't publish Opus 4.8 codes parameter count or architecture details. That's standard practice for them. What we do know is that Opus 4.8 was engineered less around raw scale and more around judgment. Anthropic's own reporting says Opus 4.8 is around 4 times less likely than its predecessor to let flaws in its own code pass by unremarked. That's not a scale story, that's a quality control story. So here's the first real distinction. Kimi K3 is winning the scale conversation outright. Opus 4.8 isn't trying to win that conversation at all. Both models support a 1 million token context window, which puts them on equal footing for handling enormous code bases, long documents, or extended conversations without losing track of earlier details. Kimi K3 ships with native visual understanding, meaning it can process images and video directly, not through a bolted-on module. Moonshot specifically highlights use cases like reading screenshots for front-end development, interpreting CAD drawings, and giving visual feedback during game development. Opus 4.8 is also multimodal, and according to enterprise partners using it in production, that multimodal strength is a genuine strength. Databricks reported that Opus 4.8 lets their AI agent, Genie, reason directly over PDFs, diagrams, and other unstructured content at 61% cheaper token cost than the previous Opus version. On paper, this category is close to a tie. The real difference shows up in how each company talks about it. Moonshot frames vision as a headline capability. Anthropic frames it as one input among many that Opus is expected to handle competently as part of real work. This is where things get genuinely contested and where you should be skeptical of anyone claiming a clean winner. Independent trackers have started publishing early results. On the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index, Kimi K3 scores around 57, placing it fourth overall, ahead of Claude Opus 4.8 but behind Claude Fable 5 and the newest GPT 5.6 tier. On the Arena.ai front-end code leaderboard, K3 took the number one spot in blind developer testing, edging out Fable 5 itself. Moonshot's own self-reported benchmarks claim K3 mostly beats Claude Opus 4.8 and GPT 5 on coding and agentic tasks, while trailing the newest Fable 5 and GPT 5.6 tiers. Worth noting, those are self-reported numbers from the company that built the model, so treat them as a starting point, not a verdict. Now here's what Opus 4.8 brings to this fight that raw benchmark scores don't capture well. Consistency over long unattended sessions. Cognition, the company behind the AI engineer, Devin, said, Opus 4.8 uses tools cleanly and follows instructions. With the consistency, their autonomous engineering workloads need to keep running unattended. Specifically calling out that it fixed comment, verbosity, and tool calling issues they'd seen in the previous Opus version. Cursor's CEO said, Opus 4.8 exceeds prior Opus models across every effort level, using fewer steps for the same intelligence. And on a benchmark called Online Mind 2 Web, which tests real browser and computer use agents, Opus 4.8 scored 84%. Described by one tester as a meaningful jump over both its predecessor and GPT 5.5. So, the pattern that's emerging, Kimi K3 is winning isolated coding and front-end benchmarks. Opus 4.8 is winning the "can I trust this to run for 6 hours without babysitting it" category. Those are different questions, and for a lot of real work, the second one matters more. This, more than any benchmark, is the actual story of this comparison. Claude Opus 4.8 is closed. You rent access to it. Anthropic controls the weights, the training data, the deployment, everything. That closed model comes with real advantages. Consistent uptime, dedicated safety testing, and a company financially incentivized to keep improving the exact version you're using. Kimi K3 is different. Once July 27th arrives, anyone with sufficient hardware can download the entire model and run it themselves. No API dependency, no usage restrictions beyond what you impose, no company that could, in theory, ever cut off your access. For researchers, for companies wary of sending sensitive data to a third party, for countries or organizations concerned about export controls on AI compute, that's not a minor feature. That's the entire pitch. There's a real-world backdrop here too. Moonshot has been open about the fact that they're operating under export restrictions on advanced chips, relying on export-compliant hardware and alternative GPU suppliers to train models at this scale. Releasing an open-weight model of this size is in part a statement that scale and capability don't have to be locked behind a paywall in San Francisco. But open weights come with a catch worth being honest about. As of this recording, those weights aren't public yet. Several independent reviewers have pointed out that until the actual files land, you can't self-host it, and you can't get fully independent reproducible benchmarks either. A promised release date isn't the same as a working download link. That verdict lands in days, not months, but it hasn't landed yet. Let's talk about what this actually costs to run. Claude Opus 4.8, standard usage. $5 per million input tokens, $25 per million output tokens. Fast mode, which runs at 2.5 times the speed, costs $10 per million input and $50 per million output. But Anthropic notes that's now 3 times cheaper for fast mode than it was on previous models. Kimi K3's API pricing, $3 per million input tokens on a cache miss, just 30 cents per million on a cache hit, and $15 per million output tokens. Do the math and Kimi K3 comes in meaningfully cheaper on output tokens, by a wide margin. For high volume workloads where you're generating a lot of text, that gap adds up fast. It's also worth knowing this is a real price increase for Moonshot compared to their previous model K2.6, which was one of the cheapest frontier options available. K3 is no longer the budget pick. It's the aggressively priced pick relative to Western frontier labs, which is a different thing. Here's where Opus 4.8 makes its strongest case, and it's not really about a number on a leaderboard. Anthropic ran a full alignment assessment before releasing Opus 4.8, and the company's alignment team concluded it reaches new highs on measures like supporting user autonomy and acting in the user's best interest, with rates of deceptive or misuse adjacent behavior substantially lower than the previous Opus version. A legal AI company reported Opus 4.8 delivered the highest score they've ever recorded on their legal agent benchmark, the first model to break 10% on their strictest all or nothing accuracy standard, which they specifically tied to how much real attorney work they can now confidently automate. Kimi K3's documentation, by contrast, is focused almost entirely on capability and access. There's no equivalent published alignment assessment in what Moonshot has released so far. That doesn't mean the model is unsafe. It means the two companies are simply optimizing for and publishing different things. Anthropic is selling trust as a feature, Moonshot is selling scale and openness as the feature. If your use case involves financial documents, legal work, healthcare, or any workflow where a confidently wrong answer causes real damage, that trust gap is not a small consideration. Let's get practical. Who should actually reach for which model? Choose Kimi K3 if you want the largest open weight model available, if you need to self-host for data privacy or compliance reasons, if your workload is front-end or visual coding heavy, or if you're running high output token volume and price per token matters more than anything else. Choose Claude Opus 4.8 if you're running long, unattended agentic workflows where a mistake is expensive. If you need dynamic workflows in Claude Code that can spin up hundreds of parallel sub-agents for something like a code-based scale migration. If your work touches legal, financial, or otherwise high-stakes domains, or if you simply want a vendor accountable for the model's behavior, neither answer is wrong. They're solving different problems. So which one actually wins? Depends entirely on what you're optimizing for. On raw scale, on price per output token, and on several independently verified coding leaderboards, Kimi K3 is currently ahead of Claude Opus 4.8. That's not hype. That's what the Arena leaderboard and artificial analysis's own index currently show. But Opus 4.8 isn't trying to win the biggest number contest. Anthropic built it to be a better collaborator. More honest about its own uncertainty, more consistent across long unattended sessions, and more trusted by the companies building serious products on top of it. That's a harder thing to put on a leaderboard, and it's exactly why enterprise partners keep describing it in terms of judgment and reliability rather than raw scores. The most honest conclusion is this: Kimi K3 is proof that open-weight models have closed the gap with the best closed models in the world, and in some benchmarks, it's already ahead. Claude Opus 4.8 is proof that raw capability isn't the only thing that matters once you're trusting a model to run your business unsupervised. Watch this space. When Kimi K3's weights actually go public later this month, the independent benchmarks that follow will tell us a lot more than any self-reported number can. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe, because both of these companies are moving fast and this comparison will look different in a month. Drop a comment, are you team open weight or team trusted and closed? And if you want a deeper dive into either model specifically, let me know in the comments and I'll make it happen. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.